So, hello everyone. I hope you all are doing good. In the last one or two, in the last few classes, we have discussed about TTT diagram and also CCT diagram. So, we have discussed about TTT and CCT diagram, and also we have discussed eutectoid part of Fe, Fe3C iron cementite phase diagram. Then we have explained the other possibilities of TTT and CCT diagram depending on the percentage of carbon that you have in the material, say hypereutectoid steel or hypereutectoid steel. So we were mainly discussing about the steels, eutectoid steels, hyper and also hypoeutectoid steel. So and also we have explained not in detail but very brief the importance of different this TTT and CCT diagrams for industrial applications like heat treatment. So today we will be looking into some industrially applicable heat treatment processes. These processes are very commonly used. We cannot explain all the heat treatment processes that are used in industries, but we will be discussing about some of the very common heat treatment processes. To explain this heat treatment processes, we have to take we have to use this TTT or CCT and the phase diagram. So let me just draw the phase diagram and the TTT diagram. So today our topic is heat treatment processes. So we will be discussing about the different heat treatment processes. So heat treatment processes, if you see, there are different types of heat treatment processes. Say you can say if you want to do heat treatment on bulk specimen, you can also do heat treatment on the surface of the specimens. So the bulk heat treatment processes are generally say annealing, normalizing, quenching, tempering. Also there are many more, but these are very common. Mar tempering, Hose tempering, and if you see the surface treatment can be done in different ways, and the very commonly used techniques are say the thermochemical. So surface treatments are of different types. One is say pure thermal as well as thermochemical. So the thermochemicals are generally say carburizing, nitriding, and you have carbonitriding. Then you have etc. There are many types. And if you have pure thermal, you can say by laser induced or electron beam induced. There are different techniques. So we are not going into this. We will be specially discussing about this, and not this. I will leave these things for you to study. We cannot discuss everything. Especially this annealing. There are different types of annealing. So out of this, annealing, normalizing, quenching, tempering, these are the very commonly used process, and annealing can be further classified into different types. Say full annealing, process annealing, recrystallization annealing, then you have stress relief, stress relieving annealing, and also you have spheroidizing, annealing, or spheroidization annealing. So spheroidizing, these are different annealing processes. So these annealing processes we will discuss what are the differences in each of these. These are very commonly used in industries, and you need to understand this, and then normalizing, quenching and tempering. Annealing, normalizing, quenching and tempering, these few processes we will discuss, and we will give you some practical examples how these are used in industry in order to get some benefit to make a product out of your raw material by improving their mechanical or other chemical properties. So in order to explain the heat treatment processes, we need to remember the phase diagram that we have used, and also the say TTT or CCT diagram. So let us draw the CCT diagram. So this is here the CCT diagram, and this is the Fe3C phase diagram. This is a part of the phase diagram, only the eutectoid part. So the eutectoid part of the phase diagram, if you remember, we have a region like this. So you have everything austenite here, gamma, you have alpha ferrite, then you have alpha plus austenite here, 0.8%, this is weight percentage of carbon, and this is temperature in this axis, and this temperature is 723 or 725 say degree Celsius, say it is in degree Celsius, and this is about 910 degree Celsius. So this temperature is known as A1 temperature. This is a critical temperature, isothermal temperature we have already discussed, and this line indicates a temperature which is the boundary between gamma and alpha plus gamma, called A3, and this line represents a CM, cemented. CM means cemented. Below this line you will have cemented phase in the austenite grain boundaries, on the austenite grain boundaries. This line is called ACM. So here you have perlite, on this side you have perlite plus alpha, you have perlite plus cementite. At this eutectoid temperature you have only perlite, but on this side you have some ferrite also, you will have some if your material is hyper eutectoid, then you will have some cementite. So now this diagram we have discussed already in the class, earlier classes. So we will use this diagram to explain the heat treatment processes, how we can use this diagram. Now Now let us draw the CCT diagram again. So CCT diagram, say again here the CCT diagram I am drawing it for say eutectoid steel. It can be the diagram, same diagram can be used to explain the physics related to transformation of hypo-eutectoid as well as hyper-eutectoid steel also. So the CCT diagram, if this is a A1 temperature or it is a T eutectoid temperature, this is how we have earlier denoted this eutectoid temperature. So this is temperature and this is time T, capital T versus small t. So suppose you have material here at this temperature. Now if you cool it at different rates, what are the phases that you will get can be easily explained by the help of this CCT diagram. So this diagram looks like something like this, if you remember. So here you have gamma austenite, below this line you have austenite but metastable, I say MS. I am just using this symbol just to represent that MS stands for metastable. Here on this side you have everything perlite, coarse and fine perlite. You will have inside this you will have perlite plus gamma. And below this, let me modify it. Below this you will have, say this is martensite start temperature, so this is martensite finish temperature. So let us, this is time T. So this is the CCT diagram. There is a little difference in the CCT and TTT diagram. So if you see, whenever we have discussed the CCT diagram or TTT diagram, we always, most of the time we have considered austenite phase being transformed into perlite or bainite or martensite by the cooling or due to cooling. So why do we consider austenite? Actually most of the heat treatment processes, generally the initial step is to austenitizing the material. That means if you have a material, the first step will be to convert it to austenite, come to this region above this temperature A1 or A3, make it austenite, then cool it at different rates and you will end up getting different phases and different morphologies of the microstructure. This is how actually you alter the mechanical properties of the material. You get different combinations of strength and ductility or say hardness or toughness, depending on the grain size, structure and the type of the phase that that forms. So today we will be discussing about this thing. So as I said, the first step for this heat treatment process is usually for steel is to convert the steel to austenite by heating it above this critical temperature. So this is called austenitizing of or austenitization. So this is called austenitization of steel. So austenitization, what happens? Suppose you have a material, say you have a perlitic steel, say eutectoid steel. Now if you eutectoid steel, suppose you have a material of this 0.8% carbon. So what will happen now, if you heat it above A1 temperature, it will become, of course you need to overcome some critical superheating, then only nucleation will start. It will not start at that equilibrium temperature A1 or TU tectoid. You have to provide some superheating that we discussed, like we need to provide some threshold undercooling for solidification. Here also we need to give some superheating. So if you apply some superheating above this temperature, then perlite will be transformed into austenite. Now this austenite, if you have austenite, depending on cooling rate you can get the different microstructure. So this now if you just take a look into the time temperature transformation diagram of austenite. So if you heat the perlite, like if you cool the austenite, you get perlite or bainite. If you cool it isothermally, you will get bainite also. In CCT diagram, usually we don't get bainite in the same time domain. It moves, the bainitic region moves far to the right side. So it is not shown here. It is difficult, as we have already explained. Anyway, if you cool austenite, you will get perlite. But when you do the austenitization, how long it takes? Because you have a material, perlitic material, you have to convert it into full austenite. Then only you can get the different phases by cooling it at different rates. So if you look at the time temperature transformation diagram of austenite, then you will get similar diagram but in the opposite. This will be the reciprocal of this. So you will have something like this time temperature transformation diagram. Say here this is temperature and this is time. So this is for austenitization. So suppose if this curve represents say 1% of austenite formation, you have a perlitic still that is being converted to austenite. This curve represents say 1% transformation. This is, you can say, the initiation, the line, the initiation curve. After some time, the perlite will be transformed into austenite. So this curve will be say something like this. Say this is, we call it 99% austenite is transformed. So you see this curve is just the inverse of this curve, or the mirror image of this. You can say similar, I mean not the same, but this temperature here it will be this A1 temperature, and then instead of undercooling you are giving superheating. Temperature increases this way, and you will notice that around 800 degrees centigrade it takes only about 5 seconds. This time will be around, this temperature is around say 850 degrees centigrade, and if you consider a time, it will be around 5 seconds. That all the austenite will be, all the perlite will be transformed into austenite. But there will be, even if it transforms 99%, there will be some residual. So you have austenite plus you will have some residual carbide. So those residual carbides are, what are those residual carbides? So if you see perlite is lamellar structure of ferrite and cementite. Cementite is an intermetallic compound. Cementite is an intermetallic compound. So it is a combination of metal non-metal. Now this compound is very strong. It is very difficult to break it. I mean dissociate it by heating. So when you heat perlite, ferrite will dissolve more easily compared to this cementite. That is why even if you 99% of perlite is transformed into say austenite, some residual carbide will be there. This is because of this cementite. Cementite is also a carbide. Now if you want to completely transform the perlite into say perlite to austenite, even if it 99% transformation takes only about 5 seconds of time, see, you will be surprised to know that it takes a large amount of time to get completely this to get this carbide completely dissolves into this austenite. So this time would be around, so you will take it will require even higher amount of time, say this line, for say 100% austenitic transformation. So perlite will be transformed into 100% austenite. It will take long time. This time can be in the order of say 30 or 40 or 50 seconds compared to 5 seconds. Say 30 to 50 seconds. Just some rough estimation. Now when all the perlite will be transformed into austenite, this austenite will not be homogeneous, because suppose you have a material, perlitic material, so you had lamellar structure, ferrite and cementite. Now what happened? The carbon percentage varies a lot. The cementite has 6.67% carbon, but ferrite has only maximum 0.02. So here the carbon percentage is maximum 0.02. So what will happen? The moment you see that 100% of perlite is transformed into austenite, the composition of carbon will still not be homogeneous throughout the material. That is because the homogenization, then that is called transformation is completed here, but this is inhomogeneous. This is inhomogeneous. Now the homogenization will take even some more time to get completely transformed into. So this line represents homogeneous gamma. So you have initiation of austenite, say 1% austenite, then you have 99% austenite but with some residual carbide. It takes very less time at higher temperature, say around 850, it takes about 5 seconds. Then if you want to get it this carbide also dissolved and get only austenite, 100% austenite, then you have to provide more time, which is many times more compared to this then you still get inhomogeneous austenite, because percentage of carbon is not uniform throughout the structure. It will take even more time to make it homogeneous. So homogenization will take around say 1000 seconds compared to, say it can take around, if it is 50 to say 100 second, it can take around 1000 second, or say a little bit less than 1000 second. So these are some just rough estimation. So you just understand that homogenization, nucleation takes very small amount of time, but homogenization takes a large amount of time. So now if you want to get a particular phase by conducting heat treatment, you have to convert your perlite, whether it is hypoeutectoid or hypereutectoid still, you have to make it austenite, then you cool it at appropriate rate. But to make it austenite, you need to know for how long you have to heat it or hold it. So this time tells you, if you are cooling it isothermally, this is the minimum time that you have to provide in order to transform the whole material into austenite. So this is called homogenization. Homogenization. So this thing you should understand. So why homogenization takes longer time compared to the completion of transformation. Let me just redraw it little bit, this part. Say this is MS. So this is what percentage of carbon. So on that side we are not drawing it. You have Fe3C on this, the rightmost part. So this is only the eutectoid part of the diagram. So now the question is, how do you do the different types of heat treatments? So if you see, as I have few minutes back, as I have written down the different heat treatment processes, annealing is one of them. So annealing, what is done? So the objective of annealing is done for different purposes, but the main objective is to reduce hardness, increase ductility. Also it is used to relieve internal or residual stresses, relieve internal and residual stresses. Also it is used to produce specific microstructure. Also to produce specific microstructure. So what is annealing actually then? To produce specific microstructure. So annealing is, as I said, these are the broad objectives of performing annealing. So as I said, there are different types of annealing. So if you consider full annealing, so full annealing is done if you have a material, the material is heated to make it austenite. Now the heating is done up to, so full annealing is done, you heat the specimen to this temperature range. So this temperature range means, say if you say full annealing. So you have heating above. This is A3 line, but A3 line is for, this is for hypoeutectoid steel. And heating above, this is A1 line in this region. Above A1 temperature for, you can write A3 temperature, A1 temperature for hyper eutectoid steel. So how much above this this line? Say generally 50 degree centigrade above. Generally 50 degree centigrade above this temperature. So you see, when you heat and then cooling rate is, you heat this material to a temperature above these two critical temperatures, and then hold it for some time. Any heat treatment processes are generally involved heating, then soaking at the temperature, and then cooling. So this is if you plot the temperature versus time variation. So will be like this. So you heat it, this temperature is TE plus 50 degree centigrade, then this is called soaking, or you write it say holding, then cooling, this is heating. So annealing is a process where the cooling rate is very small, then you have to cool it very slowly, cooling slowly. Generally the cooling is done inside the furnace. So you keep your sample in the furnace, you reach to this temperature, then you switch off the furnace. So both the furnace and the sample will be cooling together, and to the room temperature. So what happens when you do the very slow cooling? Say you are here, now you are cooling it very slowly, that means you are taking long time. So you will get a perlite, but you will get coarse perlite. So your structure, what you get essentially after full annealing, what you get essentially is a coarse structure of coarse perlitic structure. Now if your material is having a carbon percentage less than 0.8%, then you will have some pro-eutectoid phase also. Pro-eutectoid phase will be, say, this alpha, which forms here, it will remain there. And if your material is a hyper-eutectoid steel, then you will have here in this region you have austenite plus cementite. So you will have this cementite is the pro-eutectoid cementite. So when you cool it slowly, this pro-eutectoid cementite will be there. You remember this, for pro-eutectoid part we get another line, something like that. We have discussed this thing earlier. So coarse perlitic structure plus pro you take to a phase which can be alpha or Fe3C depending on the composition of the material, whether it is hypo or hyper. Now you see one important thing is that this side, when you have a hypoeutectoid material, the temperature is, heating temperature is above A3, but here it is not above ACM, it is above A1 temperature. Why it is above A1 temperature? Because in this side what will happen, if you hold your sample at this temperature for very long, you will have this nucleation of cementite on the austenite grain boundaries while you are heating the sample, then you will go for cooling. So these cementites can form network of cementites along the austenite grain boundaries, and that is not desirable because the cementite, if they form a network along the grain boundaries, the cementites are very brittle in nature. So once if by some means a crack nucleates, that crack can easily propagate through all the grain boundaries and completely break the whole structure or the whole specimen. So that is why it is not desirable. But you may not be able to completely remove the cementite. But as your temperature is less, maybe some cementite will form, but those will be formed as different particles, not the network will not be formed. So small particles of cementite may form depending on the temperature of soaking, at which temperature you soak the specimen. So this annealing, full annealing is a very costly process or time consuming process, because say in 1 hour maybe the temperature will drop by 20 or 30 degrees centigrade. So if you are reaching at say 900 degree, this temperature is 910, here it is 723, so it has to be above 723 or 910, in between this range plus 50 degree. So then it takes a long time actually. So that is why the alternatively what people do, you cool it and then hold it isothermally, and then when the transformation is completed, whole austenite, metastable austenite gets transformed into perlite. The other way is to do it like this. When it is completed, you cool it little bit faster, air cooling. You will not go for quenching, because quenching will introduce some internal stresses because of thermal stresses, but rather you go for air cooling. So this perlite cannot be transformed into martensite when you go for air cooling, it is difficult. All the austenite will be transformed into perlite if you do it like this. By this process you can actually reduce the total time required for the whole annealing processes. That is also done in industry. So I hope you have understood this full annealing. So in short, full annealing is you heat the sample to a temperature above the eutectoid temperature A1 or A3 temperature, so or A3 plus 50 degree. Above this temperature, hold it for some time and then cool it very slowly, furnace cooling. So you end up getting a very coarse perlitic structure. So the benefit of this thing, if you have a very coarse perlitic structure, you will have good ductility, strength will not be so high. So in some applications that is desirable for having good machinability in the material, so that you can deform it easily by using a cutting tool. Essentially what we do is shear deformation. So if you have this kind of structure, you can deform it more easily. Now, so like full annealing, there is another type of annealing process called process annealing. So process annealing is, as the name indicates, this is an annealing process, used in some manufacturing processes. Means while you are performing some manufacturing processes, in between you do some annealing. So that is why it is called process annealing. So generally it is used to to negate or say remove the effect of cold working. Suppose you have a thick material, say you have a billet, thick bar. Now if you want to reduce the thickness of the bar, say you want to make it a rod, then what is essentially done, lot of rolling operations are generally, or forging operations can be done. So you can do it in one step, or you can do it in multiple steps. Generally in industry, these are done in multiple steps. So you have two rollers, rotating. You have two rollers rotating, and you are feeding the thick material, and on the exit side you have a very thin bar. So when you do that, generally it is done in multiple steps, not in one step. This is just for explaining the things. You are essentially, when you reduce the section successively, what you do, you are creating a large number of defects, say point defects or say line defects, say dislocations, interstitial defects like interstitial C or vacancy. This kind of defects are created. So when these defects are created, your materials become stronger, it becomes hard. That is because you are doing some plastic work into the material, and then large number of defects are created. Those defects will actually cause strain hardening in the material. Then it will become even difficult for further processing, or say for further rolling. So then what is done essentially, if you want to do say one step, you reduce the, say in one step this is the thickness, one step you reduce it to this much, then again you reduce it to this much, and you reduce it to this. So as you are progressively deforming the material, you are essentially creating large number of defects. The defect concentration will increase, so your material will become more and more stronger, and it will be more difficult to deform. So what is essentially done, this process annealing is done in intermediate step, so that you can remove those defects. That is nothing but, again similar way, you heat the sample, hold it for some time, then cool it slowly. So what happens when you do these things, those defects will be gone. How these defects will be removed, that is by process called recovery and recrystallization. So we will discuss what is recovery and recrystallization. What happens if you have say large number of defects? There are different types of defects. Say in regular atomic arrangement, one atom is missing. Say similar way, there is another atom in the interstitial spaces. So what can happen, they can combine together and make a regular, take part in the regular arrangement of the atom. Thereby they annihilate each other. Similarly, dislocations, positive dislocation and negative dislocations can also annihilate each other. So this is called recovery, and recrystallization is a process where the deformed grain will be, if you have a grain structure like this initially, if you deform, they will become elongated. It will be more elongated. So what happens when you do recrystallization? During recrystallization, the grains will become again similar to the initial condition. There is a particular way of doing that. Then what happens? You remove all the dislocation defects and your material become essentially strain free. So you restore the structure. Then what happens? If you restore the structure, then your deformation becomes again easier like the initial stage. And that is why it is called process annealing. The annealing remains to be same. What temperature? It depends on the the particular manufacturing process, and the objective is to, as I said, objective is to soften the material, or say increase ductility. That is the objective actually of doing process annealing. So that you can do the further processing more easily. So similarly, there are other annealing processes. Other annealing processes, say stress relief, stress relief annealing. So stress relief annealing, as the name indicates, it is used to relieve the internal stresses. Suppose you are doing some machining operations. While you do the machining operations, you can induce some residual stresses in the material. Or you say, for example, you do casting or say welding. In welding, very often, almost all the time, there will be residual stresses in the weld, or welded part near the weld pool. So what happens? To remove those residual stresses, this kind of stress relief annealing is done. If you don't remove those stresses, if the internal stress is tensile stress, say for example, the structure, say suppose you make a welded joint here, and there are some say tensile residual stresses inside. Now if you apply tensile stress sigma, say it is sigma 1, essentially the structure will undergo a stress of sigma plus sigma 1. So what will happen? It can fail more easily. That will add to the external load. So that is why to remove this kind of residual stresses is very much essential, and for that stress relieving annealing is done. But the stress relieving annealing is done at a lower temperature. So this is generally the stress relieving annealing is generally done at say, let me erase this, you get P plus alpha. So the stress relieving annealing is done generally in this range. So this temperature, it is around 550 degrees. So below this temperature it is done. But the process, the technique remains same. Heat it, hold it for some time and then cool it slowly. So that is why. So you see here there is no phase change. It is only done for removing the stresses. The structure, microstructure will remain as it is. There will be no change in the microstructure. Only the stresses will be removed. So generally 550 or 600 is the upper limit of stress relieving treatment this process. So the objective is remove internal residual stresses that may develop during, say, machining, during machining, say grinding, or say non-uniform cooling, like what happens in the case of say welding or say casting, so this non-uniform cooling happens in the case of welding and casting. So what is the main mechanism of relieving the stress? Say when you do some machining, you can induce some residual stresses because of plastic deformation. Say maybe locally somewhere you might have created some small dents, or the shape of the structure is such that after machining you end up getting some residual stresses. So what happens, suppose you have a surface like this, you deform it like this. Now once you deform it like this, you have deformed the surface. Now the length of the surface is increased by this much, but when you do this kind of deformation, you essentially apply compressive loading. Now as it is deformed, this surface is deformed plastically, even if you remove the load, the surface will not be able to come back because it is plastic deformation, but the material will try to push it back to the initial shape. But it will fail to do so because this part is already plastically deformed. So the stored energy which was there while you applied the load, this will be not be removed fully. Some elastic energy will be stored in this region. So this elastic energy is called the residual stresses. So when you heat the material, these stresses will be removed by this heating and then holding it for some time and then cooling at slow rate. So what happens, the main mechanism is the recovery. Recovery is the main mechanism. Recovery means if you have dislocations or defects, those were created during the plastic deformation. So there are strain energies in the structure because of those defects. Now they will try to annihilate each other and remove the internal stresses. So internal stresses energies are nothing but the energies associated with the defects. So dislocations or say point defects or any other defects. So they will rearrange themselves in order to annihilate each other. Thereby you reduce the stresses. So there is the other kind of annealing process is the other annealing processes are say spheroidizing. Spheroidizing or spheroidization annealing. So this spheroidizing is done generally for medium and high carbon steel. It is done generally for medium and high carbon steel. So what happens if your carbon percentage is high, material will be hard. So if your material is hard, it will be difficult to machine. to improve the machinability, this spheroidizing treatment is, or spheroidizing annealing is done. So the objective is to enhance machinability. So to enhance the machinability, this spheroidizing heat treatment is done. So how it is done? Generally this is done within, either you bring your specimen to this temperature, and this is just say minus 50 degree to the A1 temperature, and then you hold it for long time. So this is you say temperature versus time, then cool it. The cooling rate in annealing doesn't matter, it is very slow, that is what you have to remember. So the heating is, this temperature is T eutectoid minus say 50 degree centigrade. Soak it at this temperature for long time, and then cool it. So what happens essentially when you hold it in this temperature, this is called spheroidizing. That was stress relief. Annealing, this is spheroidizing. So generally in high carbon steel, or steel, you have perlite plus cementite, perlite plus Fe3C. So Fe3C is generally present, pre-austenite grain boundaries, in the form of say this cementite, and this perlite is also combination of alpha plus Fe3C. These are lamellar. Now if you hold your material at the temperature for long time, this is just below this A1 temperature. What happens? This lamellar cementite, they become globular. They become globular. Why do they? The lamellar structure become globular because they become almost like spherical. So when lamellar structure becomes spherical, essentially there is a reduction in the surface energy, because spherical shape minimizes the surface energy per unit volume. So when it does so, actually it reduces the internal energy of the material. So that is the driving force for such change. When you convert the lamellar Fe3C into a globular form, essentially you reduce the surface energy. So what happens? Then your strength also reduces, your material become little bit ductile. So that is why enhances the machinability of the structure. So your lamellar structure becomes spheroidal. Lamellar Fe3C converts to spherical or globular. That is why it is called spheroidizing. Actually you make them look like sphere of different sizes. And this can be done in different ways also. You can cyclically do cooling and heating within this plus minus 50 degree temperature range of A1, this critical temperature. So you cyclically heat it and cool it within this range, say A1 plus minus 50 degree centigrade. Then also you may get this globular, spheroidized this cementite. So the whole cementite, the lamellar cementite gets transformed into globular form. So that is why you reduce the surface energy, and then that is the driving force for such transformation. Then you increases the ductility and improves the machinability of the material. So that is the objective, and it is done like this. Similarly, there is another kind of annealing. Another kind of annealing is called recrystallization annealing. So recrystallization annealing is done in this range of temperature. This is little bit above the stress relieving temperature. So as the name indicates, the recrystallization means if you do some mechanical work on some material, say forging or rolling, large number of defects will be created. Now those defects will make your material stronger, but reduces the ductility. So further deformation becomes difficult. So recrystallization is done in order to replace those defects included crystals with defect free or strain free crystals. So that is also similar. You hold it, heat it to this temperature range, and this is the phase diagram. You can have some idea about what is the temperature, and then cool it slowly. So this recrystallization is done. So your crystal structure, the grains, deformed grains with or strained grains are replaced by strain free grains. That is called recrystallization. So that is actually done to again improve the ductility of the material. Generally it is done in process. Sometimes annealing can be done to facilitates the nucleation of precipitates. You heat it to material, hold it for long time, there will be precipitation of different carbides or different intermetallics on the grain boundaries. That helps in improving the strength of material. So precipitation hardening is a method that can also be done. So this heat treatments varies depending on the material. So what is the material, that what is the composition, what is the TTT diagram or CCT diagram, and what is the this phase diagram. These things will decide the type of heat treatment that you have to apply for your material. So I hope this was useful. We will continue this discussion with the other heat treatment processes. So in this lecture we have only discussed about the annealing heat treatment processes. So I hope you understood this part. See the next part of this series of lecture in continuation with this part, then only you will have a good understanding. And for this part you can read the book by V. Raghavan or the book by Callister, An Introduction to Material Science and Engineering, written by Callister, or Physical Metallurgy by V. Raghavan. So see you in the next.